Hello, everyone. Welcome to the weekly tech roundup for Tech Asia. I'm here with a few producers from the Asia News Network's partners.
I'm Zarif from the Daily Star. We are the leading English daily newspaper in Bangladesh.
Hi, my name is Aditya and I'm from the Jakarta Post, and we're the only English newspaper now in Indonesia.
So we've had a pretty loaded week with Apple event, with news from the Indonesian government is about regulating e-commerce and in EV news, especially in Bangladesh. Let's dive right in. Apple's announcements, we obviously heard about the iPhone 15 and iPhone 15 Pro. Alongside these iPhones, Apple also released new Apple Watches with a new processor, with new interfacing functionalities. Asia is one of the biggest markets both for smartwatches and for smartphones. Apple is on the premium end of these smartwatch sales in the premium category, which has fared quite well despite the economic downturn all around the world and all around the region. Asia Pacific sells and manufactures the greatest number of smartphones in the world. Most of them are Android phones from domestic manufacturers like South Korea's Samsung or China's Huawei and Xiaomi. There's a few phone markets that have iPhones as their main smartphone.
Who's that country?
Which smartphone markets have more iPhones than Android phones?
I would guess Japan, maybe.
I was about to say Japan as well.
Ding, ding, ding. Japan has the most iPhone users in APAC with 69.22% iPhone users. There's another one that's quite high still.
Is it China?
No, China has about 19% market share for Apple.
Is it India? Is it counted?
Nope. No, India, it's dominated by Android phones, typically on the lower end of the scale and other operating system like Barra OS, but that's still a very niche portion. Nice tries. I'll move on to the answer. It's Australia, with 55.86% of iPhone users. So while we're at it, an easier question, I think. Which is the largest smartphone manufacturer in the world?
Apple, right?
It has to be Samsung.
Apple is the most profitable manufacturer in the world, and yes, Samsung dominates the world market and has done for a couple of years, and it's also the highest market share in South Korea and its home market.
In Bangladesh, there's this trend that we've seen recently in the tech market. Smartphones that are made in Bangladesh are getting more popularity, which I would say is a good thing for the local consumers because prices go down and prices have become more competitive. Companies like Xiaomi, Techno, Huawei probably as well. I'm not exactly sure, but they've recently launched local manufacturing plants in Bangladesh. So these are creating jobs. So that's one trend that I've seen recently in the Bangladesh market.
Bangladesh is on the developing end of the wealth scale. The high prices of these new models will limit adoption in Bangladesh, right?
That's right, but the interest is always there. The interest is at an all-time high, especially after the iPhone 15 launch. From the Daily Star, we did a real-time coverage of the iPhone 15 launch, and that was one of the highest read stories during the time of the launch. So that was pretty interesting that many people are following what's happening with iPhone. Now with the switch to the USB-C, I think more people will be able to adapt to this iPhone. And particularly the camera is a very big improvement, I would say, for the iPhone 15 Pro at least. Personally, I'd be a very big fan of the specs. I haven't yet had the chance to use it, of course. So yeah, people are taking an interest in iPhone, although yeah, it's true that it's a bit in the high end.
I think from what I've seen in Indonesian users, I think most of them are not really enthusiastic about the new features. So particularly in terms of camera, in terms of USB-C, it's quite similar with other manufacturers. Many of those users are actually already have iPhones. They don't think that they need to upgrade their iPhone to the newer version, especially if they compare it to the high-end products, other manufacturers such as Samsung, Xiaomi, and others. I think many of them say or think that maybe the improvement is not really that kind of significant to push them to upgrade their older version of iPhone to the newer one.
Apple has focused quite a bit on gaming, which is a huge market for Apple. It's brought them in about $12.5 billion in revenue in 2022. It's not had much success with consoles or with PCs. Apple's been trying in the past couple of years to get some developers to develop games for them. And this latest iPhone seems to be one of their strategies for this. So they showcased Resident Evil Village and a few other console-level games that can play on an iPhone.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting to see Apple delving deeper into gaming. A lot of other AAA games are coming to Apple. That will definitely be a big shift in the gaming landscape. You also talked about in one of your last few episodes about the Bangladeshi gaming market, which is growing day by day, and which is also very focused on mobile gaming. It's a good strategy, I'd say, from Apple to focus on mobile gaming because it'll be very popular, at least in Asia, of course.
Yeah, probably. But I think in terms of Indonesian market, affordability is the key. Many of them, especially for gaming, prefer to buy console, especially if the price of the console is not really that different with the mobile phone, right?
As we were saying, this is quite an unaffordable device for most, even for myself. I'm not
Yeah,
sure I'm getting an iPhone 15 Pro. People are buying smartphones less often. We've seen that also with which games succeed. So PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds is able to be run on most things, but Free Fire, Genshin Impact, Honor of Kings, Mobile Legends.
And I think in terms of that kind of mobile game, I think they don't need like a very high-end specifications, right? They still can use it in the lower tier phone, not really in the top level of iPhone specifications.
That's kind of one of the appeals of mobile gaming, right? That it's this affordable thing.
Yeah, but I think in the future maybe we can see new improvement and new development on the gaming market too. So let's see.
I agree with what Aditya said about the gaming market. I can say for the Bangladesh market at least, Bangladesh it's a very conservative society in terms of cultural appropriation and all that. So mobile gaming, just up until 2 or 3 years, it was very frowned upon thing. But that scenario is slowly changing, and we're seeing a lot of mobile gaming tournaments happening in a very large scale. It's a very exciting development to see. In a few years, maybe 4 or 5 years down the line, we'll see Bangladesh gaming market grow, become very big, and contribute largely in the global scale.
The second topic for this week, which is about e-commerce and live selling. So Aditya, do you want to pick up from here?
So people are selling products online by live performance, and then people can buy it seamlessly.
We've all purchased something online during the pandemic, and it's become this whole thing. What is live shopping for someone who's never watched one of these streams, and why are people connecting with this?
Personally, I am not a fan of live commerce, but I think many women, especially my wife too, she really like buying from live commerce. So they can see the urgency of buying that, and they see how the host of the live commerce using that kind of product and introducing that kind of product. Oh, this is good, something like that. The difference between other live commerce with TikTok Shop live commerce is actually the method of payment and the method of logistics until the product is being sent to our home is really similar. So it's like only like pressing like 2-3 buttons and the transaction is done, something like that. For background, so Indonesia's e-commerce market share in 2022, based on a research from Momentum Works, this is like a think tank based in Singapore. In Indonesia, actually Shopee and Tokopedia dominating the market with 36% and 35% of market share respectively. In the fifth position, we can see TikTok Shop with 5%, which is the focus of this new regulation because they're really famous all over the world with the live commerce mechanism. Despite having only 5% market share in 2022, TikTok Shop has gained traction ever since with several merchants. I found several merchants in Indonesia saying that, oh, my GMV from TikTok Shop now has overtaken Tokopedia, which is the second place e-commerce here in Indonesia. And many customers said that there is a tendency of fear of missing out or FOMO and urgency when buying something through live commerce. That's why TikTok Shop gaining popularity here in Indonesia. Actually, other e-commerce such as Tokopedia and Shopee have also followed TikTok Shop by launching their own live commerce feature, but the user is still small.
Wait, so that's 20% of all e-commerce?
Yeah, because the only major player who really focus on live selling is only TikTok, right? So basically, they're everywhere. And about the regulations, actually, the issue about TikTok Shop was first raised several months ago because of the report from the Financial Times that pointed out there is a cross-border commerce feature that was introduced by TikTok in UK, especially in London. this cross-border commerce, they actually similar with the other commerce feature from other e-commerce, but the caveat is the product that was sold there is not produced in UK, but instead in China. The report from the Financial Times sparked a controversy in Indonesia, which is I think the government worried that TikTok would bring the feature here and hampering the performance of local micro, small, and medium enterprises or MSMEs in Indonesia. Just for context, MSMEs in Indonesia is contributing to more than 90% of employment here in Indonesia. So small, medium enterprise is really huge here. And TikTok actually said that the firm has no plan to do cross-border commerce, similar with the UK one. They don't want to do the cross-border commerce business here in Indonesia, but the government insists that, we need to fix another issue to deal with this TikTok. And recently, the government are complaining about how TikTok merged social media and e-commerce. They said that it makes TikTok having an unfair advantage compared to their competitors here in Indonesia and also local merchants. And that's why there is a push to forbid such a combination between e-commerce and social media through a revision of Trade Minister regulations. Actually, some people complain about this push as TikTok Shop has brought benefit for some merchants, but other people argue that there's a suspicion of predatory pricing in TikTok Shop which attracts many customers. So they sell products in cheaper price with subsidies just to destroy the market, something like that.
Regarding the accusations of predatory pricing, is this like an accusation at all of these live selling websites, or is this specifically levied at TikTok?
Yeah, that's what's interesting in the public. I think the government tend to target their accusations of predatory pricing and everything just to TikTok. Personally, I think predatory pricing is like a common thing that being done by other parties too. But specifically, I think in recent months, I think government continue to say, this TikTok this, TikTok that, TikTok this, TikTok that.
Zarif, do you have any experience with live shopping in Bangladesh?
Yes, live shopping is actually quite big in Bangladesh as well. But there are no dedicated live shopping e-commerce sites. I don't know about other markets, but at least not in Bangladesh. Daraz is pretty big here, as in South Asia, as in Pakistan and other South Asian countries maybe, Daraz is an affiliate of Alibaba, I believe. So that's the leading e-commerce marketplace in Bangladesh. Apart from that, F-commerce is quite popular, which is basically Facebook commerce. This happens in Facebook Marketplace, to the point where Facebook in Bangladesh has actually become quite synonymous to internet. In any rural areas, in any villages around the remote outskirts, if you ask if they have internet or not, they will say, yes, I have Facebook. So that's how the term has become.
I think Facebook also introduced a similar thing here, but I think they don't really provide like proper payment and logistics, but I don't know how you get the goods sent in Bangladesh through Facebook Marketplace.
So in Bangladesh, Facebook Marketplace has no payment or logistical support from Facebook sides. It's completely a relationship between the buyer and the seller. The Facebook just works as a platform. So it's mostly cash on delivery, and it's based on trust and hand-to-hand cash delivery. That's it.
Yeah, I see. And I think that's why like TikTok Shop is really booming here, because they really implemented the payment and also logistic in one single app.
Yes. I think TikTok is generally more supportive about its community in that sense, because it actively provides supports, as I've seen in Bangladesh and in other markets as well, that it has dedicated managers, for example, for its creators, dedicated managers for maybe TikTok shops as well. But Facebook has no such thing. It's much larger in scale, obviously. So maybe that's one reason.
TikTok has some Chinese affiliations. I think that these kinds of discussions are happening kind of all over the world. Obviously, it's not to say that there's not some issues with live selling, but there's got to be some moderation in the discourse. Using this kind of predatory pricing as a discussion or as a proxy for a political motivation to remove these platforms, in my opinion. I don't know what you guys feel about it.
That's true. I agree with you. I've seen similar happening in India. I think TikTok is banned in India because of geopolitical reasons. Well, although it was quite popular there.
Yeah, and Indonesia, I think there is we will have like presidential elections in February, So it would be really political because the term of the current minister is really going to end. So if not now, there's no other time to implement such regulation. So yeah.
So maybe let's move on to EVs for the third topic of the week and the final topic.
We in Bangladesh are seeing a very positive shift in the mindset of the people and the regulatory authorities as well when it comes to EVs. The government has very recently, this year only, finalized the regulations for officially, legally bringing in electric vehicles in the country, and even paving way for local manufacturers to manufacture EVs locally. We've seen Audi recently launching their e-tron in Bangladesh, which is an electric SUV, which is also pretty in the high-end segment. But it's an interesting thing that they decided to officially launch it in Bangladesh. Audi is also setting up electric charging station in the country. I believe there's only 2 so far, but I'm told that they have plans for more. The government also plans to set up electric charging stations so that owning an EV and driving an EV becomes more convenient for general people or general drivers. There's this story that we've just very recently worked on. We've seen that few leading commercial banks and industry leaders have come together with an initiative to set up an electric vehicle manufacturing plant in Bangladesh. According to the industry experts and the people that I've spoken to during the report, making the report, they plan to roll out their first electric vehicles by March of next year. So that's a very fast-moving process that's already underway. Apart from that, electric buses are being launched. They're in the plans of being launched in the country. So yeah, that's an overall picture of how the EV market is moving in Bangladesh.
This goes into a wider shift towards, well, all across the world, towards more EVs for plenty of reasons. So from reducing carbon emissions to reducing cost as energy prices continue to increase, to even just ease of production. So even if it's more expensive to produce, it's easier, like you were saying, Zarif, to set up a plant that will start producing. When was the date that it will start rolling out officially?
By March next year.
Yeah, within 1 year, basically.
Less than a year, yeah.
For an internal combustion engine car, right?
That's right.
Do you have any thoughts on this, Aditya, and on the Indonesian market in particular?
Yeah. I think our government is really enthusiastic about the EV ecosystem. They want to build EV ecosystem here in the country because we have one of the biggest nickel reserves in the world. So that's why the government wants to take benefit of it. But I think personally, the consumer here is not really enthusiastic about that. So right now, as there is a data here in Indonesia, so from January and July, there are only less than 7,000 EV units sold in Indonesia. It's actually last year we sold like 10,000. So maybe we will sell like similar amount of EV this year. But compared to the total car sales, from January to July this year, it's actually 1.1 million units. So majority of it is still like internal combustion engine. So that show how unenthusiastic people here in Indonesia about EV. Actually, the government want to push that kind of EV adoption by giving the subsidies, but still not many people are really want to buy EV. Many of them still think that the price of EV, especially the four-wheeler one, is still too expensive. And some people are also dubious about the range that this EV could run, as well as the availability of charging stations in important places. And I think personally, the prospective one for EV is actually the two-wheeler one, because it's the common mode of transportation here for Indonesian people. And yeah, I think I want to see many two-wheeler manufacturers launching more EVs, because in Indonesia, the one who dominate the motorcycles market is actually the Japanese companies like Honda, Yamaha, and others. But I think Japanese companies are quite reluctant to move from internal combustion engine to electric vehicle. So the one that really push for the EV adoption is actually South Korean and also Chinese companies. So yeah, I still want to see the emergence of electric motorcycles here in Indonesia, because I expect it will be big. But yeah, for now, the EV is still really like minuscule if we talk about the Indonesian market.
I think there's a few points we can touch on here and also link back to Bangladesh. Accessibility of charging stations, which is a huge factor in the adoption of electric vehicles. We've seen that in markets from the EU to the US to even China. Is there any details on kind of how they'll be set up?
So there are no concrete plans as of yet from the government, but from what we've seen and from what the industry insiders tell us, it will mostly be placed in urban areas for now because that's where most of the consumers will be for the EVs. Because given it's still a very new thing, it still will be still in the high-end category, at least for the time being. So it will mostly be in the urban areas for now, and maybe it's gradually being rolled out to rural areas. A little more insight on this: in the rural areas of Bangladesh, while there are no EVs in that sense, but we do have auto rickshaws in rural Bangladesh, which are powered by batteries. These are local inventions. They're quite popular, and these are slowly replacing the traditional auto rickshaws, which were mechanical and also human powered sometimes. So these things are gaining popularity. If they can be brought under regulation, which the government does have a few plans, there could be battery charging stations in a small scale for these auto rickshaws in the villages and the rural areas as well.
That's really interesting because that's obviously one of the points of discussion when we're talking about EVs and the transition to green energy is that not everything has to be this giant four-wheeler, right? And especially the case in Bangladesh and in Indonesia, where most consumers aren't in a car already because of import fees or because of the costs, like just cost of ownership, or just because they don't need it. It's really interesting to see these smaller tailored vehicles coming out and being produced locally as well, that can serve these needs and that can help us really reduce these carbon footprints of these vehicles.
That's true, but the important thing is that they need to be brought under regulation because since they're locally made without any supervision, without any regulation, often these are not safe. These don't have speed limits. They're not, made by safe power sources or batteries. So there have been cases of accidents, explosions, and all that. Although those are minor, but given the popularity, I think the government should definitely look into that. Bringing this under proper guidelines and all.
Yeah, I think the one other problem that really hampering the growth of the charging station is actually the standardization of the charging stations. Because for EV, for example, the four-wheelers one, for the car one, I think some manufacturers are using like different sockets. So yeah, it's comparable with iPhone charger that use like Lightning and use USB-C and everything. And for two-wheelers, I think some of them are not using charging station, but they just swap the battery. But turns out the battery type is different between type to other type. So I think that kind of standardization is really required right now. So we shouldn't see that a certain charging station or a certain battery swap places is only can be used by a certain brand, for example.
So that's for four-wheelers, as we were saying, like there's these two connecting standards that are used. That's not the case, you're saying, in these smaller EVs, and that's posing some issues with the deployment, right?
Yeah. That's the problem. For now, I think that's not really quite a problem because the number of EV is still small.
Yeah, it's the same in Bangladesh as well. And also in Bangladesh, one of the barriers to setting up for the entire EV market actually is the capacity of power production. Electricity is quite costly in Bangladesh as it is, and we do have issues with power consumptions. But although there are newer power plants that are being set up, but it's still not probably enough for to meet the demand of the growing population in the country. Because like the economy is developing fast, new industries are being set up and everything, so the demand keeps rising up, and it's becoming a little bit difficult to keep up with that rising demand. So unless we have a surplus capacity to produce electricity, it won't be as widespread as we'd like it to be.
Maybe we can circle back on the broader point of this being a factory that's being constructed right now. Obviously, this comes into the global political situation where every country is trying to build up independence from China to India to Bangladesh to Indonesia as well, to build up their local production. And also after COVID, obviously everyone saw the delays that were caused by supply chain disruptions and wants to have their own. So is that kind of from what you can see, Zarif, one of the motivations behind this construction?
Definitely, I would say definitely that is one motivation. Another motivation is, making EVs cheaper and more affordable for local consumers, and of course, setting up that local brand for Bangladesh, and because it'll be a matter of national pride as well for them if it does well. So these are the three motivations at work, I'd say.
Yeah, I think I just want to comment on top of making the EV cheaper and making the EV like more affordable and also the local brand and everything. So the manufacturer needs to think about the quality of the shape of the EV itself, because right now in Indonesia there are some brands that sell their own like two-wheelers, the electric two-wheelers, but some of the users are complaining about, oh, they're so fragile, and if you want to change, for example, like the some parts of the motorcycle, so the part is not really available. So the automotive market is really a huge market where not only selling but also after sales is also quite important. So that if local company want to focus on that, I think they also need to do both things, not only selling the product but also after sales, the maintenance, so on and everything.
And hence the importance of regulations around this. Sarah, if you have something to say.
Thanks, Aditya, for pointing that out. That's the key, after sales and maintaining that EVs, and there's no point if I buy an EV and it doesn't perform as well as my fuel powered car would do. So yeah, regulations are important, and maintaining that quality is important.
This is part of a right to repair in a sense, where we're having these parts available and being able to work on them yourself. And let's loop right back into the start. Is one of the features that was touted by the iPhone 15, and is something that manufacturers more and more are taking into account after some consumers are starting finally to become aware of this. It's something that I feel quite passionate about, and I think is very important for safety and for repairability, especially for sustainability as well.
That is true. That's true. If more companies, leading companies like Apple, lead this movement about right to repair and sustainability, I think more companies would follow suit, and that's a really good thing for the environment, for the consumers, and for everyone in general.
I also agree. I am like an iPhone user, so I really frustrated if I cannot like make a simple repair for my iPhone. So yeah, I think it's a good move. Yeah, I hope they continue doing so.
All right, I think that closes the loop for this week's Tech Roundup.
Thanks, Alfie.
Yeah, thank you for organizing this